Welcome to This Week in Pulling, the show that brings you all the action from the world of tractor and truck pulling. I'm Dan Mayer, joined by Jeremy and Miles Krieger, and each week we'll dive into the latest highlights, breaking news, and behind-the-scenes stories from the sport we all love. From upcoming events, standout performances, and the rich history that shaped pulling into what it is today, we've got you covered. So buckle up, This Week in Pulling starts now. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 5 here. This Week in Pulling, I'm Dan Mayer, joined by my good pals, Miles and Jeremy Krieger. Guys, how you doing tonight?
Doing very well, Dan. Thanks again for having us. 5 weeks here, number 5. Great episode tonight. We're going to talk a big smoke, pro stock. Can't wait. Miles?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it seems like the weeks are going by faster now that we're doing this. I feel like we just finished recording and now we're already recording. So thanks to those that are watching, tuning in and sharing and giving us some comments. And hopefully my guess is this top 5 tonight is going to stimulate some discussion.
I think so.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. We just got the list a little bit ago, and wow, it's one of those things. We last week we had the 4-wheel drives in here, and we kind of we talked about our different who we had on the list, and I think this week is really gonna shake things up. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think each successive week since we've done this, starting with the 2-wheelers and then the 4-wheelers, there's been more and more chat, more and more banter. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting Snapchats and texts with people's top 5s. I'm loving every minute of it. It's great to see people having fun with this and kind of enjoying it for what it is and gaining more, learning more stories and background on, what people think and why they feel the way they do. And there's not only this, but the nostalgia too. It's been great for people to talk about some of their favorite vehicles from yesteryear and, tell us why they thought they were great. And, so yeah, this has been really, really fun, and I think it's only going to get bigger from here on out. I think week number 3 here, week 5 in the podcast, but week 3 in the countdowns is going to be really, really cool with all of the chatter that's going to happen.
Yeah, and of course we got with the tractors this week, and a lot of vehicles that didn't even remember. That was one of the things that we got. You talked about during the week, afterward, and a lot of people sending me, hey, I remember this 4-wheel drive and this one, and it was like, wow, yeah, we could have went on for a couple more hours, I think,
for sure.
And just all the different ones. But yeah, that was pretty neat to kind of reflect back on that. And this week's going to be even, looking at the pictures from this week, it's going to be interesting. But first things first, we got the big news this week. We've got, the 7,400-pound modified class was added to the Pullers Championship here this week. And that's pretty much the big news at this week in pulling. And, the 7,400 mod class kind of mirrors the outlaw class and the ITPA class. But I think you're going to see some of the NTPA guys get in that class. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch. I'm kind of glad they did that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, sort of like the light mod. I realize light mod probably add a little bit there, but
yeah, the NTPA is at 6,200 pounds,
right?
And where the outlaws and the ITPA, I think are both at 74 there.
7th. Yep.
And so I think this is going to some of the guys are going to step up add a little bit of weight to them and run in this class. And we had talked about how this class had kind of gained in momentum here the last couple of years. And I think you're looking for probably one of the biggest years for this light modified class on the NTPA side, as well as, the outlaws, as well as getting their numbers back up to where they were, years previous.
Sure. Yep.
Competitors can kind of go, cross the river if they'd like and see how things are over there. And, on the other hand, it'll be a little bit tougher for the guys that run normally at the heavier weight to come over and run with the NTPA side. But I think it'll be interesting. I know Papa Wayne has done it a couple times, running with the Outlaws and, running really strong with the NTPA circuit. So he's one of the guys that, has dabbled a little bit and, on that Outlaw side. And rumor has it he's going to be at the Pullers Championship there as well and running in that light mod class. So that'll be pretty neat to see.
For sure.
We all know if he can go pull somewhere, he's going. So
well, that's it. So, all right. Well, I think, guys, I think we should get to right to it here. We got Big Smoke this week, pro stocks and top five, and we kind of all put our top five down here before we get our official list handed to us, and hey, it's let's go for it. What do you say?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
So once again, driver rankings are ranked on by the other competitors in the class. So we'll have competitors from the PPL side as well as the NTPA side, more or less like a coach's poll. And those are the ones that rank the other drivers. You cannot vote for yourself or a teammate. If you have a teammate that pulls another vehicle, cannot vote for them as well. So that is those are the stringent requirements for the full pull driver rankings. And guys, we're ready to dive in.
All right, let's do this. So, talking into the votes, Dan, I'll let you go ahead and explain the voting system with the rankings.
Yep. So each of the drivers that were polled will give 5 drivers, and you can see how their all point system goes. Your number one driver will get 5 points, 4 points, and so on and so forth, right down to 1 point. And whoever's got the most points is our number one ranked driver. And there you can see once again our schedule. Next week we'll have the mods. Then we have the super stocks are going to be all lumped together. We're going to have the light supers. We're going to have the alky supers as well as the diesels all lumped together in one class. So that'll be interesting to see how that one's going to work out. We've got the mini rods and we've got the super stock diesel trucks, and we will end it all with the unlimited modifieds. Will be our final class that we'll be unveiling there on May 21st. And then, guys, it's time to go pulling.
Absolutely. It'll be here before you know it. Let's go. All right. So let's get down to it. Number 5 in your list is that ever popular fine running Warpath machine out of Ohio way. Carlton Cope doing the driving. He is our number 5 here with the Warpath Perkins powered Massey Ferguson. What can you say about this tractor? It's just one of those that's very unique. You don't see a lot of Masseys, especially in the pro stock ranks anymore. And Carlton has it figured out with this machine. The thing I love most about it, other than the sound and the noise and the big smoke, is to watch those header pipes glow orange when he makes his pass going down the track. Wonderful machine. Can't say enough about it. This is definitely in everybody's top 5 here tonight. Carlton Cope, tough runner with the Warpath.
Yeah, I feel like we should reiterate, sorry, Dan, but I feel like we should reiterate as well, like, equipment wise, that's really not something that the competitor was to consider in voting. It was really more driving style, technique, how they handle things in the seat, that sort of aspect. Sure. And so as we reveal these 5, you think about this list, and there's some guys who I had on my list as well. So sorry to cut you off, Dan. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, to Jeremy, with Carlton getting that tractor, back up to where we're used to seeing it, and how great that was at the farm show this year. I mean,
yep.
We talked about the farm show at our first show, we did, and just everybody that ran, so well at that farm show. I mean, we had 2 Masseys that made it. I mean, it was just, you couldn't fathom, how that was all going to play out. And It was just good to see that Warpath back where it needed to be.
Absolutely. So there is number 5.
So there we get a clip of the Warpath running there. We just talked about the farm show there, and Carlton making his way into the finals there, and yeah, good to see that Massey back up to where it needs to be. And so number 5 in our ranking here as our pro stock rankings continue here, and we'll move things along here to number 4 here, and let's see. Oh, and there's another tractor that has kind of made a resurgence here as of late, as we see Tim Kane will be in the number 4 spot here. Once again, voted on by fellow pro stock competitors. They put him in the number 4 spot.
Absolutely. And I think, the new engine combination for that crew, Tim has always been great out there on the circuit, but they've really hit pay dirt here. They've figured a lot of things out with this new engine combination, and it is really good to see him back in the hunt with national event wins and a force to be reckoned with again. And I know he's enjoying that quite a bit.
Yeah, there's just nothing you can really take away from what he's been able to do, and there are guys who are on this list that I will tell you that I think have proven themselves with less and going more because of their driving style, because of what they do with the track, how they read it, and I think Tim is one of those guys that over the last few years may have been down on ponies, but wasn't necessarily out of the mix in the performance side of things, and now obviously, as Jeremy's alluded to, like the idea of the new performance package he's got from Lemke, that's given him a chance to drive and only further do what he is capable of doing. So obviously major kudos to those folks that are voting and seeing what he's able to do as well.
Yeah, and in debuting that package, 1 year ago at the farm show, and then carrying it on throughout the summer there, and picking up the big win down there in Benson. It's been quite a while. I want to say back 2019-ish, I think, was the last time that he had sat in the winner's circle. So that was very impressive, and good to see that. We saw it again at the farm show here. The Red Gambler back where it needed to be there in the winner's circle.
And it was great to see that for sure. And had the opportunity to see him out on the circuit this summer a couple of times doing very well. And it's like they got the spring in their step again. Not that they really, his record sort of precedes itself, and he's done very, very good over the years, and one of the, the longevity that he's had in the sport. But it's just really good to see him kind of, back to the top and kind of enjoying success again. I really think that's a great thing for sure with Tim Kaine and the Red Gambler crew.
And all the old guy rules signs, there at the farm show, those were kind of popping up everywhere throughout the summer there and then into the farm show. So that was pretty neat to see.
Absolutely.
I get the honor to reveal so unique to this group. We will talk about a guy who's really just taken to the pro stock class over the course of the last 3 years. His brother purchased really, really solid equipment, don't get me wrong, but Brandon Simon has done a fantastic job of being a quick study and learning and doing his thing with each of those passes down the track that he gets to with not just his tractor, but even a few other tractors that he's been able to drive. So that is the loud and heavy tractor featured right there. But obviously they had a few others that he has done the driving for, and even has had a hand in helping with Brent Meyer when he was not able to drive here or there as well. So Brandon can drive the wheels off of pretty well anything. He's proven that, be it in a two-wheel drive, a light mod, this pro stock class, or what I feel like he just seems to be the most natural, and even still at times is that modified tractor. But slipping the clutch and being able to take the screaming pro stock tractor down the track is not an easy task, and he has made it look quite easy. And Dano and I got the opportunity to watch that first pass in Benson, North Carolina a few years ago, and he won. So pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can't say anything you haven't already said. I mean, the Simons in general are great at what they do, but Brandon, with all of the, the history and the various, competition vehicles that they have access to, from two-wheelers to pro stocks to light mods to, full on 4-engine beasts, the kid can drive. There's no question about it, and very deserving to be in the rankings.
And one of the guys, like Miles said, new to the class. I mean, relatively within the last couple of years, were guys, we saw, Tim Kaine, Carlton Cope, guys, 20 plus years of running in this class, and to come out there and the fellow competitors say, hey, this guy here, look at, he can, he can drive, and, two-wheelers, like you say, light mods, big mods, it don't matter,
Well, they work very hard at it out there in Farley. And as Miles stated, they go after great equipment. Like if it's on the market and they have access to it and something, catches their eye and comes up for sale, it's going to head to Farley, and they kind of see to what makes it tick. They got Brad Walkup and the whole crew down there helping things out. And, I think, great equipment, is one thing, but Brandon can drive. There's no doubt. RJ can drive. They can all drive for sure. But it's good to see him in this list.
All right. Well, I'd say let's move on here. Number 2.
Okay,
I think we got a preview
2.
a little earlier from our producer backstage.
That's okay. Number 2 coming. Let's talk about. Number 2 tonight, Louisville, Ohio. We go to Danny Schmucker and the Schmucker family and that Rampage machine. Another tough customer out of the Buckeye State. Now, I kind of lean towards both of the Schmuckers, but Danny is one very capable driver with that Rampage machine. Of course, the brain trust with his dad. They kind of bounce one another, bounce ideas off of one another. And if one's usually early, the other one's late. And if one's late, the other's usually early. But Danny is a tough runner and very, very competitive in the pro stock ranks. It's really good to see him in there too, at number 2 here tonight.
Yeah, I think for, when you think about that sort of generation of guys who, I mean, I want to say Danny's still young in this class, considering the age of the pro stock driver as Tim Kaine and his dad Kevin and some of the other guys might be participating, but the achievements certainly don't reflect that with what Danny's been able to do in the pro stock class. But you think about the fact that he's still got another 20 some odd, 30 some odd years of running a pro stocker. It's pretty phenomenal to think about everything he's achieved. And obviously they're another group of guys who I would tell you, I feel very similarly about that, don't always have maybe all of the horsepower of the guys that are out there beating. They study and they find a way to get around them by setting up their tractor and driving the wheels off of it. And I commend them both on that. I did have Kevin in my initial list. He was the guy who, and we'll talk about that as we get deeper, but he was the guy who I was bouncing back and forth with. And Danny and he were kind of the one I was like, can I put 2 on the list?
See,
or how does
I did the
work?
same.
So,
like I, to me, it's like, how you going to, we'll talk about that when we get there. We have unfinished business here, but number 2 here tonight is none other than the Rampage machine, and Danny Schmucker. Congratulations to him. So that leaves just one, Mr. Dan Mayer.
Yes, we are down to it. And, before we move on to number 1, I got to say about, with Danny and Kevin this summer, not running a full schedule. They just kind of picked and choose this summer, and where they wanted to run, and it didn't matter.
For sure.
PPL pulls, NTPA pulls, wherever they showed up, they're always right there in the mix. And then, of course, the farm show. And, they had some gremlins that they were fighting throughout the summer and, trying to work their way through them. And, I think it was something with the injectors, I think is what their issue was with that, with their tractors there. But boy, it just goes to show you, with anywhere that they show up and, you don't have to run for points here just to be in the mix. And these guys prove that each and every time that they go out. So congratulations to Danny for number 2 here tonight. But we've got the big winner. And we are going to unveil number 1 here tonight with our pro stock rank. Well, when it's all said and done, everybody looks to that River Rat.
No surprises.
Congratulations, Kevin Masterson, with that River Rat, as he is the ranked number 1 competitor in pro stock. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of discussion about the number 1 spot, but I think you will see quite a bit there in 2 through 5 there as, we reached out. Of course, we got to mention, talked to Kevin yesterday for a little bit and tried to get him to come on the show. And as you guys know, Kevin's not one for talking. So he was tried to get him on here, but he just had other, Kevin, he just, but congratulations to Kevin. And as number 1 here with the River Rat. And, what a year it's been for that team. The last how many years, as we look back on things and, both tractors, but Kevin with the River Rat, that's what, number 1 ranked driver by his fellow peers. And what do you guys think?
Well, and I think, arguably, you hear a lot of people talk about drivers in the sport, Kevin is ranked number one here tonight, and I know several people who would say that Kevin's dad is quite possibly the best one to ever do it. In the pro stock classes over the course of the year. So he had a really good teacher, not saying that, he doesn't come by what he gets and he doesn't deserve every bit of it, because he does. But, when your dad is Don Masterson and you grow up watching Don Masterson and living with Don Masterson and working on tractors with Don Masterson, I don't think that hurts.
Yeah, no, it definitely does not. No.
I think the competitive advantage, though, and I'm not taking anything away from Don, but I think a lot of what Don's successes were at the end was Kevin. Because they utilize the dyno, they find their horsepower and make it work. Kevin gets that tractor where Don just sits in the seat and makes it really, really powerful and goes down the track. And that was a beautiful thing. So pretty tough combination. And you think that, most of these tractors, though, we start talking about the depth of what we had. And, Mastersons are a multi-tractor team. Simon's obviously multi-tractor team, Schmucker's multi-tractor team. You think about Tim Kaine and Carlton making this list, just one attempt for those guys typically now, with Chris having moved on to run the 5.0 or to run in super stock diesel. Sure. Even one year. He has not been running on the pro stock side with his dad. And I think that even goes back, you show those guys a little bit and talk about how awesome they've been as well. But think about Kevin and what he's done. That tractor has just won, and it's won, and his dad's tractor has won. So pretty tough combination.
Gangsters.
And I was going to throw in the fact too. You look at, Kevin as a mentor, for Joey Harris. Joey had kind of gotten behind the wheel last couple of years, and boy, the last year went on fire there at the beginning part of the season. I think he had like 4 in a row that he had won, and just as a mentor to helping him drive. And Kevin, you talk about setups and everything, but he still had to drive that tractor, and it really, like you said, it doesn't really matter who's on either one.
No,
they just the end result. I mean, we've seen it all. I mean, we've seen everybody on that team win. And that's the impressive part. Is just they are just and that's why everybody ranked him number one. So congratulations to Kevin and crew.
Well, and I don't know about you guys, but when you go to an event as an announcer, you're kind of interested to be like, okay, well, who's on what tractor tonight? And who's driving what, and where are they, and where's Kevin, and is Kevin even driving tonight? Because I've seen that too.
And then I've seen where other guys are driving, all of a sudden Kevin's driving both of them. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's Kevin behind the wheel. And it's like, well, no, he was supposed to so no, and then you'll talk to one of the guys, and no, Kevin, he's going to drive both of them tonight. And, so yeah, like you say, you just never know. And, but they're ready to go. That's for sure.
Yeah. Those tractors are when they show up, they're ready to be driven by someone, and they usually do very well.
So what about you guys? What's your list look like as far as how you were against the other pro stock competitors that voted here?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't have a tremendous amount of difference, a tremendous amount of disparity from the list. There's one name omitted who I had on my list, and that was Brad Moss. I know Brad is not driving full time, but a lot of the time he is on his former tractor, the now owned Money on Black from Peter Norton. And Brad was the one who I securely had in my top 5. And I'll just be honest with you, I had him in number 2 position because I feel like when he shows up, he still puts himself in a really, really good spot to win a pole every time he's driving. So, and I think a lot of times when you look at who's having success at Louisville, while Brad may not be driving, he's often the guy that's standing there with a can of ether and setting a cone. And I think that gives him another feather in the cap. So, as I started to dig through who I would had, there's, like I said, not a lot of change in that top 5 and who those guys should have been. Others that I considered, and I don't want to name drop all of them because I don't want to take some of the ones you were discussing, but, there are a few others that I was really looking at. I think Esden Limke is doing a phenomenal job and coming on board, wheeling that family's tractor, and seemed to really, really kind of find a patch of where he was just very tough tough this past summer. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Braden Schromick and say the exact same thing with what that tractor was doing at the end of the summer. And I don't just mean, the tractor was doing all the work. I think the drivers were doing a phenomenal job behind the wheel. Brian drove that tractor very successfully. Braden's cousin drove that tractor very successfully, I believe, as well in a debut pass. So each of those guys, you put in there and you think, yeah, the tractor worked really well and they had a perfect setup of what they were doing, but somebody still had to drive it. And a little bit later here, I think one of the things we might want to talk about and we'll discuss maybe for a few minutes is who are some of these people that you think might be on the list a year from now? And I'll bring that topic up a little bit later on, but something maybe people can think about as we kind of work through our lists a little bit more. But I'll stick with those two for now and let you guys continue to talk about some more of them.
Well, one that I had on my list that wasn't included was Rob Russell. I think that Rob has really taken to the pro stock class, for so many years, ran that multi-charger super stock class and then got away from the sport, came back with the pro stock and really is, some different combinations. And you talk about, with Brad Moss, there's another, guy that he helps out, and Rob had a great farm show this year, made it into the finals and, it was, a big winner on Saturday afternoon there. And, he's a guy that, all them years of experience and I had him tipping into that top 5. So he was one that I was surprised that did not make it in there.
For sure. Well, now I don't know, guys, it might not have been hard for you, but this so far has been the hardest for me because there's probably 20 that I wanted in my top 5. Like it was very hard for me to, just determine where to go with this. And so, the way I did it was I kind of bundled the Schmuckers together and I put them both in there because I feel they're a dual threat and I had them both kind of in my conversation. I as well had Rob Russell in there. And then I considered Robbie Lemke as well. And, Miles has Esden covered, but I think Robbie is still an excellent driver. And I also had Rhett Parrish kind of on the bubble for me. I think the young man is a heck of a driver. And, I understand he's young and is not maybe as seasoned as some of these other guys, but I think what he's been able to do in a very short time behind the wheel of the tractor has been nothing short of impressive with that, especially with the new machine that they unveiled 3 years ago. I think he's doing very well. But this, of the 3 weeks that we've done this, I went back and forth and back and forth. I'm not going to tell you I agonized over it, but I just couldn't really feel comfortable with 5. I'll just be honest.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that a bit. And Rhett would fall into the topic of what I think we talk about in our next sort of segment. In my mind, I think he's somebody who's up and coming and under the tutelage of his father and Colin Ross at Chaos. They are really, really molding that young man into an awesome driver. And I think that tells us where we're going here in the future. I think that there were, some other folks I had on there. I had, Rob Russell as well in there. And you start looking at the depth of where we could go within the class. And like you said, Jeremy, just a tremendous amount of people who were really,
well, and
really
I had,
in it.
I had considered Mickey Shorter. We got the word this week that he has hung up his helmet and his boots. That tractor has been sold and head to Wisconsin. I'm not going to lie, my heart broke just a little bit. I get it. I understand. There's a time and a place. But before that, I had considered him, and from a longevity perspective, that tractor, and as a driver, already, he's won a championship on the national ranks before. It seems like when that tractor is running, and there's another one that can drive, even if he has an underpowered machine, he can figure out how to get the job done. So it would have been. He was in consideration for me too, among a lot of others.
Yeah, and I kind of had Kevin Schmucker kind of grouped together with Danny as well, and then you look at, Julia Ray,
Yep.
she's one that, I see on the, the up and coming. I see that, she's had shots of brilliance out there on the track. And I think it's just that all important time in the seat and, look out one of these years, it's going to be that breakout season where, hey, there's a championship, and
Right.
I think, and it's just like you say, you just go down the list and you kind of look and you're like, oh, well, that, here, this one here can, it just.
Right. And and if you talk about, Julia, you kind of got to talk about Mike. Like
Right.
it's those tractors are both super good, and it just kind of depends on who's driving where and when. But I agree. I totally agree that's why I think so far this week, I struggled with it. Like I'm like, there's 25 people on this list, and I can only talk about 5. But I'm glad to see where we went. I'm glad to see where the pullers have landed. I think it's fair, and I think it'll contribute to some great conversation.
And it's all going to evolve here into Farley.
Yeah.
Because if you saw, the list for Farley, the 50 competitors that have signed up for that class, and you look down through and you're like, all right,
Yep.
you pick me out one that
Yep.
can't win. You
Yep.
can't, and that's, wow, that's going to be something. That's
It is.
something.
No doubt. Well, there you go. Top 5 as ranked by the pullers. And like I say, we could talk at length about who we landed on and who everybody else picked, but there are your top 5. So a good list. I think it's going to, do well to create some great banter within the, these discussions, and, people will be, it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But to your point, Miles, let's have a conversation about who we think is going to be, the next people to step up a year from now. Where you like to see it go? Who do you think are going to be coming into their own in the sport?
Well, I'll just be honest with you. As I reflected on last week's show in the 4-wheel drive class, I mentioned a few people that I had on my list, and there was one that was not on my list. And I'll just be honest with you. I regret him not being on my list because I have said for years that man was as smooth as silk in the seat, and that was Jason Bramer. And I did not bring Jason Bramer up in my top 5 drivers. But if you were to ask me to think about that guy is one who I would put on that list. And now that he is back in this sport, he would be on my list here in the future of somebody. So I texted the both of you and said, hey, I think we really need to consider also, like, let's put it on the radar. Let's make some predictions. And if we get to do this a year from now and reveal these very same rankings, let's circle back and see if by chance we were able to forecast
how
anything
close
like
we
that.
are or how close we aren't.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So no doubt. So for me, I'm going to be honest with you, and I may take some thunder of yours already. Rhett Paris is one that I would talk about, but the 2 that I would also join in that group are both Reese and Grayson Shelton. I think they have been very quick studies, and I think Reese just proved that like crazy at Louisville this past winter with his impressive performances. And I also think, as they have continued to dig in, that was the same way it was in the mini class. Both those guys came from the 2-wheel drive side, and their dad and they collectively had awesome pieces, but that doesn't guarantee a win, especially in the mini class. And what they do, they went out and started winning, driving the wheels off of them with their intensity that they have. And they've brought that same sort of attention to detail and intensity to the pro stock class. And in just a short amount of time, they've gone from no idea in diesel to winning the National Farm Machinery Show. And I think that just speaks volumes for where we might go in the very near future. So I'll bundle them together, and I will tell you that next year, the Shelton brothers, and I'm not picking on Camille. She needs a year, maybe 2, to kind of feel this out and figure out exactly how she's going to drive. But I think those 2 guys are very up and coming.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. When you talked about who you're looking at for next year, you got to include the Sheltons. I'm going to go with Braden Schrammick. I think that Braden, like we talked about, that tractor ended the season on a high note, and I think he's going to be, easily into that top 5 for next year. Depending, hopefully everything goes well for the tractor throughout the summer there. But like we saw late in the season there, it really came on.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think, given everybody we've talked about, I don't want to reiterate, but I think if I had to add a couple, maybe I would say maybe Julia Ray. I feel like she was on the cusp early in the season. They had a good thing going, and then it just kind of, didn't go their way towards the last. So it'll be good to see, the Mack tractors back up. And I think Esden Limke is another one that I love watching that kid drive. And of course, he's got a great teacher in his dad. And, in the shop, they do great things with the engines there. They know a lot of things about the dyno and, all the things that they're doing with the engines. So, I think the sky's the limit with him too. So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I would pick them. And I don't know. I just have a feeling that the Schmuckers are going to start to return to prominence maybe next year. Like if they chase the full circuit, we'll see maybe a little more of them out there in the, from a competitive perspective. But we'll see.
It's difficult, guys, and you think about the top three competitors in the NTPA Grand National points in 2024 in the Pro Stock category were Brett Meyer and Julia and Chance McGrath. And, I think we could very easily include them. Jeremy, you already talked about Julia, and we've discussed her some. Chance McGrath with an all new tractor in 2024 was in the hunt and proved himself as well. So now with knowledge of how to get everything kind of tuned to his tractor, can he just go out and drive the wheels off of it? And we've left the guy off who's won two championships consecutively in the Pro Stock tractor class. So let's not forget about him and what he's capable of doing. Obviously, he's been incredibly successful in the Pro Stock game in a short amount of time as well. So I'll circle him as well and let him be in there in that group of who we might put in that top five. But goodness gracious, you look at the list and there's another, as Jeremy said, there's another 10 to 15 who we could very easily discuss.
Can we do top 15 next year?
Well, that's when we started this discussion here about, who we're looking at for next year. And, I gave my Schrammick pick there, but I had, Brett Meyer here on my list. And it was like, here's a guy that he just keeps going out there and getting the job done, and coming from the trucks and just, hey, he's got this thing figured out here,
We should be talking more about him for sure.
Exactly. But I mean, what an accomplishment, really. I mean, 2 national championships for guys out there that have, never done it before, and him to go out there and do that. Yep. And, hey, you gotta, so I'm going to say, circle Brent, like you said, Miles. I think he's definitely going to be in that, he's going to earn the respect of the other pullers there for next year and get in that top 5. I'm fairly certain.
So I want to challenge anybody that's watching. Let's have your discussion and let's have your topics. And I also want to just be completely honest with folks that are listening and that are watching. My knowledge of outlaw pro stock drivers in today's world is not nearly as high as it needs to be for me to categorically speak of their driving skill. Years ago, I could talk about a few of them very comfortably after being out there and watching and knowing some of them. But there's been sort of a change of the guard, a new regime of folks that are doing some driving out there. And I don't want to discredit any of them. They very well might find themselves on the list next year. They also might already be earning of being on this list this year. But my guess is our peers at the NTPA and the PPL aren't as aware as well.
Well, I think we saw this year with Clint Menning, picking up that win at the end of the season there. There's an outlaw guy for so many years. And this year, you kind of just, worked the PPL circuit throughout the whole summer there and finally was able to get that tractor in the winner's circle. And I got a chance to see, Cody Yark down there in Texas this past year. And, for so many years seeing, videos of him and never seeing that tractor in real life. There's another guy right there that, can get the job done for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Well, if nothing else, it's been great to discuss. But I mean, like you say, it's very, very hard to accurately predict how this is going to work when you have such a deep pool of anybody who can go out and, do it on any given evening. That's been the hardest part for me, just to narrow it down and try to understand, okay, who do we pick and why? But this has been fun, and it's been good to, think about it, as I'm in sales for a living, so I spend a lot of time in my car, so I have a lot of opportunity to kind of rock back and forth in my mind about how things could go. And this has been fun, and we've got several more weeks. So next week we go into a whole new topic and a whole new class.
Yeah, we go modified next week. So, get get that ball rolling. There we see it, April 23rd. Our show will have the modified class, and we're going to lump in, everybody once again together, and Outlaws, PPL, and TPA, everybody into that mix.
Are we putting light modified tractors in that modified division, or are we sticking with just kind of the larger, class?
I believe, well, a lot of the guys, the light mod guys, ran into the modified class, so it was kind of just, kind of worked it together. So I believe there are
Okay.
I believe there is some guys in the light class that, were for, in the modified. So they kind of lumped them together, the light mods and the mods together.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Fair enough.
well, guys, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Favorite all-time pro stock tractors. Now, this is, we talked about getting our top fives for right now.
Yes.
But now we can start going back. And just like we did last week with the four-wheel drives, the more you start digging into different things. And Miles, you kick it off here this week.
Oh boy, I get to go first. So am I supposed to rank them? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I have them in order of how I ranked them. But I will definitely go first with my pictures, and I will tell you, if you know me, as we dig deeper, we'll get probably a little bit more in there. But that tractor there, obviously, I loved that John Deere 4250, and the people that drove that tractor. It meant a lot to get to become friends with them and peers with them over the years as well. So, Dan, I will rely on you even more for the history and historical facts of that tractor, because it changed hands and did some pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a picture there of Carl Atlee behind the wheel of this tractor, but that 40,
Yep.
4250 tractor. I mean, that just, down the years, you can see, all the stickers down the side of it there, and, changing hands over the years. And yeah, just a beautiful machine, and, good to see that it made your top five.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I actually may have sent you 6, so I may have cheated just a little bit. And if you know me, then you know that is my all-time favorite tractor right there in the Pro Stock division, and it's not even close. I have a replica that my brother had made for me for my 40th birthday, sitting on the shelf in my bedroom right now. And so the Wilkins Lorenz team, that tractor right there was just it for me, and there's no question about it. The stablemate to that tractor, the old Sneaky Snake, which I also have listed in my grouping here of the top 5. Those two tractors were just were the path. And I talked last week about having the opportunity to travel with Harold and Betty Walliser, and I made that shirt for myself and wore it around everywhere, that shotgun red. And then I think what from the fans' perspective, maybe the most recognizable name would be that Sneaky Snake tractor that we just saw. You think about the chant just very, very lightly starting in the crowd of snake, 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 and it picking up and the crowd going crazy when the Sneaky Snake came out. So obviously the Wilkins Lorenz team, they were right there in my mix. Another tractor that I have to consider, and my close proximity to their family, of course, the Green Streak tractor of the Boyd family. That's one that was definitely in my mix and on my radar of one that I categorically talked about all the time. And that 4455 is kind of where I remember a lot of the roots kind of being of that tractor before they went to the 8400 series or the 70 series that they had, I believe, there at the end. But obviously I've become quite close with the family. I've worked for them now for over 11 years. And I hope one day there's a pro stock again of a Green Streak variety out there running up and down the track again with us. But intensity and the competitive nature that they brought to the game, the beauty of their tractors and how they piloted them, I definitely felt like this tractor had to be on my list as well. And then I think I had 2 more maybe that I talked about. One of them was the Keystone Cop. And obviously Sue Ellen Oswald, I remember that tractor greatly, and certainly remember the story that she brought in being one of the only ladies that was out there at the game at that time, especially in the pro stock class. So you guys, you want to chime in and jump in on any of these that I've talked about? I'm sorry, I've really kind of cut the conversation out. And then I'll hit my last one right here, and that, of course, is Larry Shope and that Iron Dragon. Man, what a tough out he was on the NTPA Grand National Circuit. So just to kind of recap who I had: Iron Dragon of Larry Shope, Sue Ellen Oswald, the Keystone Cop. I had the Sneaky Snake, obviously, and John Lorenz. I had the Lethal Weapon of Carl Atley, the Boyd's Green Streak, and then that Shotgun Red. Those were my 6 that we'll say I included.
And add into your conversation now, where were you guys the first time that you heard the snake chant? It was at Bowling Green that I heard it the first time. What about you guys? Okay.
Bowling Green.
Because it kind of it rolled into the farm show, and then you hear it different places.
Yep.
And it was just one of those things that was like, what are we doing here? And then all of a sudden, okay, here it goes. And and then Sue Ellen Oswald too. She was another one that kind of broke the barriers, really. I mean, one at the farm show with that Keystone Cop, and then I think eventually became a lawyer, wasn't it? She was a police officer, and then
officer, and then became in law enforcement.
To be a lawyer, and so that's a cool story there with Sue Ellen. And I'm trying to think. I think, didn't she drive the modified there? Bill Voorhees there for a bit.
Yeah, I think
into the 90s. I think just a little bit there, and that was kind of, and then that was pretty much, she was off the radar as far as where Sue Ellen went. But yeah, she was a great story.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, do you?
Thanks for, I guess I got to blaze the trail here, and so like I said, there are so many. I talked last week about Jim Moots and Randy Stewart and some of those guys that meant so much to me, and in those years of just being able to be a boy and watch them grow and pull and being a little guy sitting in the bleachers and Shotgun Red. That's the one. I mean, I remember the TNN Ralph Emery show with Shotgun Red, and I remember how cool that was. And I'm not going to lie to you. At some point in time, I'm going to raise a really awesome buck, and he's going to be in our barn here, and his name's going to be Shotgun Red. So just go ahead and put that on paper. Someday, Shotgun Red will be siring some champions out.
I think you ought to do more of that.
Miles, last week, didn't somebody? You talked about the Coltrane. Didn't somebody, reply back that they were like neighbors with him or something, wasn't it? It was.
Yes. Okay. So let's change the subject here for just a second, because mind blown. But yes. So first and foremost, we find out that Randy Stewart's truck's just down the road from a guy who's watching. And then additionally, we find that the Tennessean is sitting at a guy in Kentucky's place. I get a text message like, "Hey, by the way, here's the truck you were talking." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So pretty awesome.
Yeah. Brandon Cox has it. I talked to him, and of course he is, president of the KTPA, the Kentucky Tractor Pullers Association, and he is going to bring that back out as a pro stock 4-wheel drive, hopefully this summer. And it's going to change going to leave the scheme the way it is, but change the name to Family Tradition. So I had the opportunity to talk with him a little bit about that. But yeah, I was just as blown away as you guys were.
When you sent that picture over, I could not believe that was still the original Tennessean.
For sure.
And
it looks.
It does.
Awesome.
It looks very much like the original. And while we're talking, I gotta mention Eddie Holland, of course, Eddie Holland Designs. He sent me a picture of the Johnson's first truck that you were talking about, Shake, Rattle, and Pull, or whatever it was called.
Yes, the brown truck. Yeah,
yeah, the brown truck that I had never seen it. So he had a photo of it and was happy enough to share it with us. So I thank him, appreciate him for sure.
We need to encourage folks to find his website, Jeremy. He has updated a ton of designs on there, and he has got some throwbacks to some pretty amazing 4-wheel drive trucks, some that we talked about last week that are on there. So go buy a t-shirt from him. Let him know that the guys here from This Week in Pulling sent you that way. And hopefully somewhere this summer when we catch you, you'll have one of those on. I'm going to order myself a few based off of what I saw yesterday afternoon, just kind of scrolling.
And also got the really cool posters posters too. I got
Yeah.
made up a poster for me, and when I finally get my my back room here all set up here, I will have some of Eddie's posters up there and be able to see those, and kind of working on that here. And well, Jeremy, who do you got for your all-time greats as far as pro stock goes?
Well, let's do this. My list is probably much different. I didn't so far we haven't duplicated, I don't think, but we'll see what picture. Okay, so yeah, let's get started. This is a Massey that I loved, Gary Hendrickson, and the tractor was called Sweet Sweet Music, and as I understood it, he was a music teacher. I don't know if he was a band teacher or orchestra teacher or maybe a choir teacher, but he had something to do with teaching music, and so that's where the name of this tractor came from. And I kind of always loved it, and I also loved that it was a Massey Ferguson. And of course, in those days you didn't really see very many, so it was really neat to see. So that was my number 5, Sweet Sweet Music, and Mr. Gary Hendrickson. This would be the all-time for me. This would be number 1. This is the original, the Buck Eater, the 4955 machine of Mickey Shorter. Of course, this tractor was, the old Laverne Nepper machine that they acquired, and Mickey had great success with it for a very long time before he went to the component tractor much later. But this, for me, the Sullivan, Indiana-based machine is my, kind of my number 1 of all time. I just love this tractor, love the Shorter family, and I have a picture. I didn't send it to you, and I probably should have, but there's a picture of my son when he is, probably 3 months old, sitting in his little bassinet next to the tractor. And there's another one where I'm holding him. And as he grew older, he spent a lot of time in the seat of the tractor and got various pictures as he grew. I was really hoping to get him over there on Wednesday night this year to get him back in the seat, just before his 18th birthday, and take another shot of him for a comparison. But I ended up putting him on the Lemke's tractor here on Saturday afternoon because he wasn't able to make it Wednesday night. But there's my number 1, the Buck Eater, the Shorter family out of Sullivan, Indiana. Okay, here's the next one, the Tampico bunch, the Grassy Fork bunch, the Typin family, and that Nightlife machine. I have always loved that logo, and the guy with the guy with the beer in his hand, and
Yes,
I just love him. I don't know if he has a name. Like, I feel like they're missing an opportunity to animate that guy or put him on t-shirts. That guy and I are pals. I love that logo. I always have, and I'm delighted that the tractor is back out on the circuit. I think as a hot farm now. Which is really neat to see them coming back. The Typin family been around the sport for a very long time, but this one was one that I always loved. Scott Typin, Phil Typin, the Nightlife team out of Tampico, Indiana. And then here is Carl Smith and the Night Moves, out of another one out of Indiana that I always loved. And it just seemed to me like that Magnum sheet metal was really kind of cutting edge for its time. And this tractor was really good. And even before he had it, it was good. But when he got it, it was super good. And I really enjoyed watching him drive all those years. Loved the Night Moves machine. And of course, if you're a fan of all, Bob Seger's records, Night Moves as a song. And I always just kind of liked this one growing up. It was one of my absolute favorites. And I think I have one to go. And this is the Road Farmer, the 4240 machine of the Snyders. Bob and Scott, and as I understood it, they both, or maybe Bob was a county highway,
something like
employee. That. Yeah, he worked for the state of Ohio and worked, driving like snow plows and road crew stuff. So that's where the Road Farmer came from. And we're not zoomed in on that sheet metal, but there's a picture of basically a Ohio State highway truck pulling the tractor. And I always just kind of thought the Road Farmer concept was pretty neat, and I loved that tractor a lot back in the day.
Yeah, and you can hear Harold telling you the story about him working for the highway department.
For
and
sure.
that just and when I give my top 5 here, we'll go to what was your favorite era of pro stocks? Because a lot of people, the late 90s, the early 2000s, the late,
Sure.
So we'll go into that a little bit here. If once we get my top 5 up here. But mine spread all across the board here. I'm more or less not a certain era. It's just all different well, this is my number one right here. Now this River Rat tractor, when Kevin got on this tractor, late 90s, I just, always with that leg up. You always see Kevin driving with that leg up on. And that River Rat tractor right there, just the all-time favorite there for pro stock tractors. And he just won a lot. That's where really he just kind of carved his way right there with that tractor, and away he went. And you can see ranked number 1 here today and all-time rankings here for the year. And there's the Monreal, the Bandit tractor. Now this Massey Ferguson, just because I don't know if it was just because of the paint scheme on it. Now they had a reddish orange scheme they ran for a couple years too, but I always remember that black. First time I saw this, the black one outdoors, and it just something, seeing one of these pro stocks all painted up like that. I just thought that was really cool. So that's the Monreal family there out of Ohio. And Dad Dale and son Mike. And right here, this Hurricane Alice tractor. Now, both versions, the orange version as well as this white one, I wish I had I've got it somewhere and I just couldn't find it, but I've got the tractor just sitting in the pits, and it gleamed. It just had that look to it. And I love the clean look of this tractor. And this one here was, ranked in there in one of my top 5 here. Of course, the Doman family out of Kansas, and who knows? Maybe we'll see that tractor back out, sometime soon, having something out again. Good to see him out there. And here's a tractor that, this guy, he did things different, and went out here and painted his international green. The preparation, Tom Harmon, and great family in pulling, and had some different tractors throughout the years. Then he went with the, red into the green scheme, and, over the different kind of styles there. But that was another one of my favorites right there. And I believe I should have one more here. And there it is, the original Rampage with the black side shields there. And you can see Kevin sporting the, it don't get any tougher than that. Look at that. He's got the guns out.
Sleeveless. Yeah.
But that tractor right there, that was another favorite that liked the early days of pro stocks, and seeing them in the mid 80s. And so that was, they weren't showstoppers like they were today, but boy, they ran. And that was the neat part about that class.
Were there honorable mentions that you guys did not put in? There was one that I thought long and hard about after I had submitted my pictures, and I do want to bring it up just because I always thought it was cool. So the Campbell brothers, Randy Campbell, and the Soup Line Express John Deere. Of course, their last name was Campbell, and of course a play on words with the Soup Line Express. I always loved that tractor because it had the yellow rims, like it had these bright yellow John Deere colored rims that sort of matched the yellow paint, and so I always enjoyed the Soup Line. Were there any others for you guys that kind of made your list that we didn't talk about?
Well, I had Bill Voorhees, the Orient Express tractor before it went to Carl Smith.
Sure.
And it was just always watching Bill with his facial expressions with the open face helmet.
Right.
It was always interesting to watch. And whether it was you're watching him in real life or watching it on a video or a picture, he was always making some kind of face, and
yep.
But boy, that tractor ran. That was, him and Roland Barr. Roland Barr was another one there. Another guy that the early days of pro stock pulling, they were right there neck and neck.
So I will tell you that there are two, and they're still modern to this day that are out there. When Cody Shea brought out the 1206 Red Edge Pro,
yes,
and I got to see it for the first time at Gordyville.
Yes,
guys,
I was there and I remember.
My mind was just absolutely blown.
Picking your jaw up off the floor was
yeah. I spent a lot of time staring at that tractor and just looking at that tractor. And so we'll go back just a little bit. I mean, I don't want to exclude any of what's happened in Chaos's shop over the course of the last several years. But prior to that, when Miles Stratton and Brad Moss brought that Young Buck tractor out as well, It it really caught my eye. And I'm not gonna lie to you, when they put the black paint on it and made it the TS Performance Young Buck, I might have shed a tear because I loved that thing so much. To kind of go back, Dan, just for your sake, one of your tractors, the Hurricane Alice. I could stare at that paint scheme on the side of that tractor and the graphic and detail for a long time too. So, I love orange. That's my favorite color. So obviously that's one that would have been on my list to look at and talk about. And I also think be remiss if we didn't discuss some of Lance Little's creativity and what he did, because the unique style and look of what he and Levi and Chris were able to put together in their shop. They were kind of the chaos before maybe chaos was really happening.
Right.
That 830, the old Minneapolis Moline that went to the Justisons, the wheat fed tractor, and some of the amazing John Deere tractors that came out. And you asked about eras. Well, my eras are definitely going to include Tantrum and K tractors in that group.
For sure.
So the so we're going to go like early 2000-ish.
I'll go 2002 to about 2006.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to
that's
say
my favorite window.
Right around that late 90s, like 97, 98 era. I want to say that was probably one of the, just before the roll cages. And then when we had just before the roll cages there. And I think that was one of my favorite eras there, when, numbers were huge and, you just never knew, who was going to come away with the win. And that was something really cool with that class.
Sure thing.
What about you, Jeremy?
No, I think I would agree with Miles. I think, early to mid 2000s is my favorite. But like I say, there's never really been an era of pro stock that I didn't think was awesome, if I'm being 100% transparent with you.
But going to Bowling Green and there being 70 of them.
Well,
and they pull Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah,
I'll just watch all day. Let's go.
I'm there. Let's do it again.
And and then the Ohio State tractors just stepping their game up and showing up the national guys, Monty McCoy, guys like that, and
sure,
just wow.
But I always enjoyed, you always kind of had that running sort of tally with Keith Bradley. Hey, Harold, we got 71 of them, and you couldn't tell if he was happy or sad.
Yeah, and then, well, he was when the super farms came along, right? Then they started making, they kind of started joking about that as they went into that. But some great picks there with the pro stocks there, and some great era, and how far they've come. That's another thing too. You talk about how far they have come, and they're just unbelievable. It's we talked about the farm show and all the unveiling of the new equipment, and it's turned into an annual thing at the farm show. Everybody out there fighting to get that first picture of here come and that's so cool, and where years ago it was, they were out there and they were pulling, but now it's, you got that show part of it.
Absolutely.
It's hard to believe how quickly an hour goes.
It is. Yeah. I was just looking,
we're already over an hour, and I won't lie to you, but the show that gets to follow us again this evening, and Mr. Purser being on there for the conversation about putting 8 Hemis right there on his tractor is one I'm interested in tuning into. So pretty awesome deal.
Absolutely, guys. Well, I think that'll do it. Next week we got modifieds coming up. We've got some great stuff coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and some Farley, Iowa. They're going to start announcing some different things as far as revealing classes, and that's going to be interesting.
Yep,
for sure.
Well, guys, that will conclude it here tonight. Once again, congratulations to the Grandview Gangsters, Kevin Masterson, the #1 ranked pro stock puller. And we went back in time here and looking back in history at some of our greatest of all time. And there we see the list once again. Kevin Masterson, #1, Danny Schmucker, #2, Brandon Simon, 3, #4 was Tim Kane, and #5, Carlton Cope. And of course, voted on by fellow pro stock competitors here. So we'll have the mods next week. And, well, what else you guys got to say? Anything else?
Oh, just thanks.
Time to start studying.
We better get on it. We got another tough list to come back and bring you this time next week.
I'm not going to lie to you. I've been jotting down some different ideas I've got for modifieds next week. So that's, as we were talking about things, I'm like, I got to get ahead of the game here instead of waiting later in the week here to get my. So there we go, Kevin Masterson. Well, guys, what a better way to close out the show.
See you next week.
All right, we'll see y'all next week.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.